we're not supposed to have titles of nobility here in the United States, and that's what the jurisprudence has been since the United States inception. But if you look at it, and it's not necessarily like a legal and established precedent of titles of nobility, but it kind of is. Like, look at police officers who get away with committing crimes because they're a police officer. CPS workers who get away with committing crimes and in fact are instructed to go commit crimes by the legislature, and they get away with it because they're a CPS officer. I mean, that's kind of like a title of nobility. They're being relieved of a criminal action or an action in law because of their title, because of their status, because of the person that they're carrying around in society.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
At least don't sue the title if you're coming after them, right? Sue them like as a man or woman. Now you get a better chance of hitting it, right?
Well, I mean, that's the way it used to work. Until we get courts of law back, not so much. But Grace has her hand up. Hey, Grace.
Hey, Grace. Glad you could join us.
Am I on?
Yeah, you put your hand.
Oh, jeepers. I did mean to. I'm in the middle of cleaning my kitchen. How are you guys?
All right.
We're doing pretty good. How are y'all doing?
Good. Busy. Crazy busy. Kind of freaked out. My oldest says hi.
Hi, oldest.
Hi, oldest.
Wow.
Yeah, so I actually just got on and I've been kind of in and out listening, so forgive me. I'm sorry.
Would you like for us to mute you back?
Yeah, for right now, and then later maybe I can pose a question, but I'm literally in the middle of cleaning and my mind is kind of just in listening mode.
That's fine. We'll just breathe, listen, hang out. And if you have a question later, just raise your hand.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for coming out.
Ever notice how often she brags about her clean kitchen? She mentioned it like 3 times.
I think she said she was cleaning her kitchen, which means that's not clean.
I mean, I try not to brag. I try not to gloat on here, but some people.
So, well, one of the things that I was about to say just a moment ago is, this is what the founding fathers, quote unquote, realized when they were writing the Federalist Papers, and they all talked about this. It's kind of human nature. Like, you give people freedom and they will fight to go back to their own enslavement. You take away all titles of nobility, you take away, all titles of status, and you put every man, every woman on equal standing. It's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, that, here in America, Grace said definitely not clean. But, here in America, the whole idea of the jurisprudence is that no man's above the law and no man's below the law. That was really the idea. We established that. And, a little over, about 250 years later, the people have gotten right back to where they were. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it's a lot worse.
Yeah. 50 years ago, we had prominent members of the community dying just to say that you shouldn't judge people based on their skin color. And now people are willing to kill only to judge people on their skin color,
Yeah, it's completely reversed. And what I think is the most insane about it is, like, all of the people who marched and fought back in the 60s and forced the government's hand, like, they literally forced the government to recognize the rights of people of different colors and different ethnicities and this and that. And those people are now marching and supporting kind of the exact opposite.
Yep. And it's like we talked about previously pertaining to certain people, that they espouse these ideas on calls like this. And they talk about how, you're not forcing me to get a shot. It's a bad shot. It'll kill people and I'll kill you before I let that happen, blah, blah, that kind of thing. And yet we both know that if it was something that they agreed on, subject matter wise, they would be all about it. If it was like, you know, if it was like a forced hug, you know, they'd be like, yeah, government should be hugging everybody. And it's like, no, dude, you got to be consistent. The government shouldn't be forcing anything, period. But yeah, I almost went too far with that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with you. There's one thing that the government's supposed to enforce. Kind of the entire purpose of government.
Food stamps.
No, law.
Right. Exactly.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. You know, like men form a government for the protection of property, for persons and property. Well, what is that? That's law.
That's why the inevitable reoccurs. You know, if there was a stage of anarchy, which I'm not opposed to, but it would never be ultimate, you know, because at some point, some man is going to want to leave his property unattended, or he's going to need to, and he's going to need somebody to sort of protect that, you know.
Well, and that entity is supposed to be the government.
Right, right.
You know, I mean, the way that the law is supposed to work, like for instance, let's just talk about an arrest warrant. The way that an arrest warrant is supposed to work is not that the government has an officer go allege somebody did something wrong that is probably some type of made up pretended offense. The way that the law is supposed to work is that when a man or a woman or a child or somebody gets wronged in society, they can go down to the magistrate's office, you know, go under oath or affirmation and swear out a warrant, and then the government will go and enforce that warrant and bring the wrongdoer to some sort of agreed upon justice for the society.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a good direction to head. Let's say that somewhat mythical court of law did exist in my county or something, and I was wronged by a former district attorney or something like that, you know, and a fellow common man or woman, and I needed justice. And so what would I do about that?
Well, let me go back to Alice's question earlier about, you know, do you sue the man and the woman? You know, you don't go after the CPS title, you don't go after the officer title. And back in the day when we had courts of law, that's exactly what you did. Like if a man or a woman, whether it was a CPS officer, a police officer, whatever their title and position was, you would go after them in law, prove your case against them, convince a jury would award you a verdict one way or another, either for you or against you. And if the jury awarded you a verdict in your favor, then you would go back on the administrative side and you would say, okay, well, you know, Jane Doe violated my right to travel upon God's green earth, and because they violated my right and wrongfully locked me up for not having a little piece of plastic that the state hands out, you know, a jury decided that they owe me $25,000. But because they did this in an officer person, you know, and a state administrator person, I'm going to go to their boss and say, hey, now you owe me the $25,000 because, you know, Jane Doe probably doesn't have it sitting under her bed stashed away. Jane Doe couldn't have done these atrocities to me without exercising your person, the person you gave them. Where's my money check?
Yeah. And so where is it that you've observed? Where is the splitting of law and administrative? Is it people being shut down at the clerk's office, initial filings, you think?
Well, I mean, the splitting at this point is that there's basically no law unless they feel generous enough to allow you to see it that day. But the real splitting is that everybody who's been raised in this society, they've never really seen it. They wouldn't know what they were looking at if they were looking at it.
Yeah, kind of like bred into compliance.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, everybody is so used to the administration, law almost doesn't make sense to them. And you know that this is a fact because it's like, think about how many people are kind of open-minded, kind of think the type of ways that we think, and then they get a jury summons and they're like, well, how do I get out of this?
Yeah. Yep.
You see, because when it comes to them performing law, when it comes to them upholding law, they don't care.
Yeah.
They would rather just leave it up to the administrative state. And the people who do actually care, the people who do get that jury summons and they're like, ooh, I get to be on a jury. They're really thinking to themselves, oh, I get to make somebody's life miserable by throwing them in jail.
Yeah. And I get to skip out on work or somehow, deviate from a responsibility.
No, I would say most people, they're just so miserable with their own existence that, they're just wishing to share that misery with someone else.
If I have to wear a mask, you should have to too. Something like that.
If I got to pay taxes, you should have to too. I mean, this is why like asking for a jury on any type of tax situation is always a bad idea.
Yeah. I think it goes beyond taxes, like, and I've thought about that too. Just a simple thing, like if you were to take a no driver's license somehow to a jury, do you think 12 people in your community would give a crap?
Well, I
They would
mean,
say,
in most
I had to pay.
communities, it would probably be 6. And honestly, I think it's really on the sincerity and the demeanor of the individual presenting their side of the case.
Yeah, I agree.
Did we lose your one arc? Alice, what's going on? Looks like you left for a second.
No, that's the case, but I can see how like some juries sometimes could have a bigger discretion than the judge. I mean, if we hate the discretion of the judge as much, what is the solution to the discretion of the jury? Now, instead of handling one guy, you're handling 12, 6 to 12, maybe more, right?
Yeah. But I mean, if you're on the defense, like if you're defending an action that the state's bringing against you, you're talking to 6 or 12 people, but it's really only important for you to get one individual to have conviction on your side, to believe the way that you believe and to stand up for it. That's one of the beautiful things about the common law system.
How many jurors in common law again? Is it 2023 or 25?
Well, in a common law grand jury, it's 25. If you go back to the original juries, like in the 100 court or the court baron, it would have been the whole town. Like the whole town would have been the jury, or the whole villa, or village, or community would have been the jury. And of course, as towns started getting bigger and turning into townships and cities, and you start having more than like 300 people kind of living in probably a 10 square mile area, that's when they started consolidating the jury and bringing it down to 12. Another place where the jury was really brought down to 12 was in merchant law. So, if like a merchant sailed in to a port and say they had some type of altercation with another merchant, typically what would happen is that you would have 6 people from that port and then 6 people from the ship. You would have a 50-50 jury. And that also developed like in communities where people were actually having actions against each other. Like for instance, if you and I had an action against each other and we were in a community, you would be able to pick 6 people and I would be able to pick 6 people. And, the whole idea is that if somebody's a really good friend with you, then they're going to let you know when you've done something wrong or out of line. And the other idea is everybody knew law back then.
Have you been jurors before?
Have I been to a jury? Like, have I been before a jury or have I been a part of a jury?
Have you served in any jury?
No, I've never served on jury duty. I don't think that they would pick me to serve on a jury duty. I don't think I'm ever getting that invitation, although I would love to get that invitation. Grace got called in twice.
It'll be interesting to see you as a jurist. See, the rest of the guys think you're administrator, and then you shock them with that common law thing, and they wouldn't believe it. Anybody who knows common law that serves in a jury.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you that typically when the state is prosecuting people today, when they're picking a jury, one of the questions that they always have is, has anybody in here ever studied law on their own? Like, has anybody in here ever just gone down to a law library or looked into it? Because they want to make sure to get those people off of the jury. My mom, amazingly enough, has been on the jury 3 times. And one of the times she was on the jury, a kid that I actually went to middle school with had shot another individual downtown at one of the parks downtown. There was an altercation about a woman, and he went down there to shoot him, but his girlfriend talked him out of it. And so as he was walking away, the other gentleman shot at him, and he turned around and returned fire and ended up killing him. And the state was trying to, give him murder 1 because he had premeditated it. He was going to go do it and this and that. Anyways, everybody on the jury was ready to convict him. And my mom actually changed everybody's mind because he had turned around and he was walking away. And that was the end of that altercation. And then when the other guy started firing at him, it was a new altercation. So self-defense at that point.
Check.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, so I unplugged my mic on accident, and I was sitting here telling you guys stories, and we were having a grand old time, and you guys missed out.
Well, thank you everybody for coming out. Thanks, Grace, for coming back. She did hop back on, and we will be back here next week. It'll be October the 6th.
And you know what that means? It'll be a new fiscal year in the federal government's calendar. Yay!
It will?
Is that what it means?
Yeah, so if anybody has any, doesn't feel completely confident with encountering a public police officer in any way, then try to keep a low profile till after the 1st, because their quota is going to be up high right now.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, it's kind of like, imagine if you only got paid once a year.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you got paid, you'd be like, okay, this got to last. We got to stretch this. But then at the end of the year, if you're like, oh, I got money left over.
And you got to spend it before you get paid again.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
So they're going to be out, because next year, if they can't justify needing, like 20 officers on the whatever force, if they said, oh, you wrote less tickets this year, we must not need so many people. They start laying them off, cutting funds, all that stuff. So it's like, we got 100 arrests to make, and, one day to do it, they're just going to bust everybody they come across, I mean, the guy on the street doesn't know this. So the cop, if you ever talk to a cop and he says, there's no quota, he's probably telling you what he believes to be true. But the higher you go up the chain, it's self-evident. We don't get the funding, the manpower, if we can't justify it.
Yeah.
So